Having a great offense is normally a crucial role in building a championship contender.
Showing pressure. They pick it up. The pass. Touchdown! Andrew Quarles, the tight end.
But how important is it to have the best offense in the NFL in any given year? Recently, I released a video covering every number one defense since 2010. If you haven't checked that out, I'll put a link to that. But to summarize for the sake of this video, of the 13 number one defenses since 2010, all 13 made the playoffs, 11 made the divisional, 8 made the conference championship, 5 made the Super Bowl, and 3 ended up winning it all. So with that said, how do the number one offenses compare in the same time span? Now, before we continue on, this video is brought to you by Upside. Now, I think most of us are trying to spend less and save more, but that's difficult to do with certain non-negotiables. You gotta spend money on groceries and gas. So in that process, why not get a little cash back? And that's where Upside comes in clutch. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out. With Upside, I get cash back on every purchase. Personally, I mostly use it for gas, but my favorite thing about the app is just how easy it is to use. To get started, you're going to want to download the free Upside app. Use my promo code KTO and get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. So I'm just going to walk through the steps on my phone to show you guys how easy this is. So the first thing you're going to want to do is download the app like I said. You're going to get asked a series of questions, and then you're just going to simply pick the option that you want. So I'm going to go highlight gas, and I'm gonna scroll down to one of the places that I normally use, and then you simply add your card, claim the offer, and it's as simple as that. Another great thing about Upside is that it doesn't sell your personal information to third parties. They know that your information is a vital part of their trusted relationship with you. Others love this app. Upside users are earning hundreds of dollars per year, and that's probably why they have a 4.8 rating in the App Store. So once again, to get started, download the free Upside app and use my promo code KTO to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon of your first tank of gas. Now let's get back to the video. In 2010, the number one offense in terms of scoring, passing touchdowns, the least amount of turnovers, and points per drive was the Patriots. 07 to 09 was a wild time with Tom Brady and Randy Moss.
Able to go long for Moss. Moss has his first touchdown as a Patriot.
But 2010 was a year where New England made changes. They traded Moss early in the season, brought back Deion Branch in a separate trade, and heavily utilized their two rookie tight ends, Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. Even their leading running backs were different. So the only recognizable pieces from this offense was Brady and Welker. With an offensive line that featured 2 Pro Bowlers, this offense was efficient.
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
Oh, look at this. This is Dan Connolly, the right guard.
Scoring more often than anybody in the league, and rarely turned the ball over. Brady won MVP in a season where he set an NFL record 7 consecutive games without a turnover. He also set records for the most consecutive passes without an interception, and his previous record for touchdown to interception ratio. With a top 10 defense, this team only lost 2 regular season games, and they took the number 1 seed in the playoffs. But at home versus the Jets in the divisional round, Brady threw an interception on their first drive. The Jets set the defensive tone right away, and the Patriots lost at home after falling behind 14-3 at half. It's one of the very few moments Jets fans have to celebrate in their recent memory. This is also crazy considering that the Jets traveled to New England a month before and got blown out 45-3. 2011. In the year of historical significance for quarterback play, 2 stood out above the rest, along with their teams offensively. That would be Drew Brees and the Saints, as well as Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. You can make a case for both as being the best that year. The Packers scored slightly more points, and Rodgers won MVP with his insane 45 touchdown to 6 interception campaign.
And it's caught by Jones, and away goes Jones.
But Brees also set records, throwing for 5,476 yards with an impressive 46 touchdowns to 14 interceptions.
Brees gonna air it out. Devery Henderson, wow.
The Saints also outgained everybody in yards by a landslide and had a much more impressive rush attack compared to the Packers. Now, because this year was such an outlier in production with both these teams, I'll just discuss each of them. They actually faced off in week 1 in a wild high-scoring game, ending with 76 combined points and setting the tone for the season.
They give it to him. He can't get it.
Also, I do need to mention that the Packers were coming off a Super Bowl win the previous year. For the Packers offensively, Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings, Jermichael Finley, James Jones, and Donald Driver all played a pivotal role in a widespread pass attack. They were so unstoppable that even when backup Matt Flynn got in there in the final game of the regular season, he balled out, throwing for a shocking 480 yards and 6 touchdowns. When Rodgers was in there, he was so good that this team looked like a potential candidate to dethrone the 72 Dolphins as the only undefeated team ever, but they lost in Week 15.
Jackie Battle picks it, and a Gatorade bath for Cornell.
For the Saints, they just moved the ball so effortlessly all year long. Pierre Thomas and Darren Sproles were dual threats out of the backfield. Colston had a solid season, and Jimmy Graham was virtually unguardable in 2011. They suffered 3 losses early on, but they ended the regular season on a 8-game win streak, and going into the postseason, with these two teams, the NFC looked scary. Overall, the Packers season ended in disappointing fashion. In a cold and windy battle with the Giants, the Packers got worked. Despite scoring on their first 2 drives, uncharacteristic turnovers led them to falling way behind, and they couldn't recover. For the Saints, they put up 45 on Detroit in the wild card, but when they took on the Niners in San Francisco, they fell down 17-0 early, but they did crawl their way back in. The fourth quarter produced one of the wildest finishes ever. 4 lead changes in the final 4 minutes, including this famous catch by Vernon Davis. Neither of these dominant offenses even reached the NFC Championship. 2012. Of the top 3 offenses in 2011, the top 2 faded slightly in 2012, while the third best from 2011, the Patriots, improved, averaging nearly 35 a game. They led the league in points, yards, first downs, and rushing touchdowns, and they turned the ball over the second least of any team, and were simply the most efficient offense on a per-drive basis. They rarely had a dud.
Brady sacked 3 times in the first half. The good news, his nose looked good.
And were very similar to their 2010 team that I previously talked about. Coming off a devastating Super Bowl loss, Brady was out for vengeance and had another solid year.
It's a shot downfield for Lloyd. Got the ball. Touchdown.
You still saw the same cast of pass catchers with Welker, Gronk, Lloyd, and Hernandez, but this time around, they had a stronger rush attack, led by Stephen Ridley and Danny Woodhead. They tallied 40-plus points 5 times and 50-plus points twice. With a top 10 defense, the Patriots went 12-4.
Down the middle of the man. Gronkowski has a touchdown.
Good enough for a bye and the 2 seed in the playoffs. After outracing Houston in the divisional round, the Patriots hosted the Ravens in the AFC Championship. The Ravens weren't a standout team statistically in 2012. In fact, they lost 4 of their last 5 regular season games. But they got hot at the right time and brought their A game to New England. The number 1 Patriots offense was shut down in the second half with multiple turnovers, while the Ravens' 3 touchdown drives in a row led them to the eventual win and Super Bowl victory 2 weeks later. 2013. If you thought any of the previous offenses were the best ever, well, the 2013 Broncos set the record straight.
Fakes the quick throw. He's got Julius Thomas. Thomas inside the 5 and into the end zone for a Denver touchdown.
After Manning got comfortable with his new team in 2012, proving that he could still perform at a high level, his second season in Denver was about as perfect as a quarterback could ever play. They set an NFL record 606 points, which was 150 more points than the second best team. Also, I don't know what's more shocking, how much better Denver was, or the fact that the Bears had the second best offense. But anyways, their defense was only ranked 22nd, but it didn't seem to matter. Manning put together the best season in NFL history for a quarterback. Over 5,400 yards, 55 touchdowns to just 10 interceptions. Their receiving core was incredible and put up numbers in a way that we may never see again.
Manning down the field, tackle over the shoulder grab, and a spin move.
The addition of Wes Welker proved to be massive, as he had been traded for in the offseason. This meant that Welker had gone from one number 1 offense to the next. And overall, this team scored over 40 6 times and over 50 3 times. The 2013 Broncos finished 13-3 and were clear favorites headed into the playoffs. But in the playoffs, despite 2 big wins versus the Chargers and Patriots, the number 1 offense in the league was completely shut down by the number 1 defense in the Super Bowl. It may be the most disappointing overall Super Bowl performance of any team in recent memory. But to give credit where credit's due, the Seahawks showed the world that day just how special that defense was. 2014. The Broncos had come back down to earth. Manning still had a great season, but it was the Packers, led by Aaron Rodgers, who slightly outperformed them statistically, and they turned the ball over less.
And what a catch!
After an injury in 2013 ended his season early, Rodgers was back to MVP form with 38 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions in 2013. Second-year back Eddie Lacy gave this offense the bell cow back they needed, while also improving as a pass catcher in 2014. Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb were both Pro Bowlers with 25 touchdowns combined. Despite a 1-2 start, the Packers rallied to win 11 of their last 13 to achieve a bye and the 2 seed in the playoffs. The only team above them was Seattle, who had the #1 defense in football.
And he gets back there and he blocks it. Unbelievable.
Also, the Packers had this crazy 2-week stretch where Rodgers had 6 passing touchdowns in the first half versus Chicago, as the Packers scored 55 points.
Almost feel sorry for Mark Trestman.
And then the following week, the Packers put up 53 against the Eagles.
That was pathetic. That was weak.
This was the first time in franchise history that Green Bay had put up over 50 in back-to-back weeks, and just the 5th team to ever do so. After holding off Dallas in the divisional round, the #1 offense versus #1 defense faced off in the NFC title match. It looked like the Packers were well on their way to a Super Bowl appearance, as they jumped out to a 16-0 lead at halftime. They even led 19-7 in the fourth quarter, but then they just collapsed in the final 2 minutes. Seattle recovered an onside kick and went on to shock Green Bay. This was a truly gutsy win for the Seahawks. 2015. While the Packers fell off, one team came out of nowhere to take the NFL by storm: the Carolina Panthers.
Newton to the goal line, touchdown!
The difference between 2014 and 2015 for this team was staggering. They went from 19th in scoring offensively to 1st in 2015. Cam Newton went from average to MVP, and the team more than doubled their wins, going from 7 to 15. What's really crazy was that their top receiver from 2014, Kelvin Benjamin, tore his ACL in the preseason, leaving question marks about who was going to be Newton's main targets in the pass game besides Greg Olsen. A few guys like Ted Ginn stepped up, but it was really about this team's run game. The two-headed monster of Cam Newton and Jonathan Stewart pummeled opponents routinely, especially in the red zone. And this was by far the most efficient season for Cam through the air. Everything people envisioned back when he was drafted had come to fruition in 2015. Also, their defense was insane, forcing the most turnovers in the NFL. And the dominance of these two units together were the reason why the Panthers only lost 1 game. In the postseason, after holding off the Seahawks in the divisional round and absolutely blowing out the Cardinals, the Panthers looked destined to win it all. Once again, this was another #1 offense versus #1 defense matchup. The Panthers were favored by 5 points over the Broncos, and I remember thinking they had a huge advantage because of just how well Cam Newton had been versus how poorly the Broncos offense had performed to that point. But never underestimate a dominant defense, which is what Denver had. 4 turnovers held the Panthers in check, and Cam Newton was never the same following the loss. 2016. While the Panthers fell from grace, their division rival, the Atlanta Falcons, did their own rendition of a 1-year turnaround.
Look at the cuts and the speed. Gabriel still going. Touchdown.
Going from 21st offensively in 2015 to 1st in 2016. In his second year with Matt Ryan, offensive coordinator Kyle Shanahan turned him from middle of the road to MVP. His #1 target was Julio Jones in his prime, making this the best receiver-quarterback duo in the NFL. And the running back tandem of Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman made this offense very versatile. The Falcons were by far and away the best offense in 2016, ranking out 1 or 2 in most major statistical categories. The offensive coaching staff alone had Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, and Mike McDaniel, so obviously this unit was well coached. However, their defense was mediocre at best.
Nice move by Sims. Spinning, he goes in. Touchdown.
So even with massive improvement offensively, the Falcons finished 11-5. The Falcons dominated their way through the playoffs before facing off in the Super Bowl with the #1 defense in football. Obviously, 28-3 happened. But instead of focusing on the Patriots' comeback, let's just briefly look at it from the Falcons' offensive perspective. Their last 4 drives of the game combined for just 44 total yards, 3 punts, and a fumble. Things had to go disastrously for the best offense in the game, and that's just what happened. Perhaps the most insane part about this meltdown was Julio Jones nearly saved the Falcons with this incredible catch to put the Falcons in field goal range. But a sack and a holding call forced the Falcons out of field goal range. It would have put the game seemingly out of reach, but they had to punt, giving the Patriots a chance to go down and tie things up. 2017. The Rams follow the trend of the previous 2 teams I mentioned, going from bad to great offensively in a 1-year span. They led the league in scoring by 20 points, but with that said, the Patriots had 500 plus more yards and slightly more yards per play, with nearly half the turnovers and a higher scoring percentage per drive. So 2017's best offense is the Patriots. Coming off their Super Bowl win, the Patriots just did more of the same. It's unsurprising that the greatest quarterback of all time is a huge factor to a successful offense, but this may have been more prevalent in 2017 than any other year.
Brady unleashes one for Cox.
Edelman missed the entire season due to injury, and outside of Gronk, Brady's top options included Brandon Cooks, who's good, don't get me wrong, Danny Amendola, Chris Hogan, Deion Lewis, and James White. When you compare this to the previous year, they had a healthy Edelman, Martellus Bennett, and LeGarrette Blount shouldering much of the load out of the backfield with 18 touchdowns in 2016. Without Blount, it was mostly a collection of guys who had mostly been backups throughout their career. But despite this, the offense just consistently moved the ball, leading the league in first downs. With the 5th ranked defense in scoring, they finished 13-3 with Brady winning another MVP. He was also 40, so it made it even more wild. In the playoffs, the Patriots routed the Titans, then faced off versus the number 1 defense Jacksonville in the AFC title game. Despite trailing by 10 with less than 10 minutes to go, the offense showed up when it mattered most, and got lucky with a few calls. Then in the Super Bowl, despite setting a record for the most passing yards in the big game with over 500, Brady took the L to Foles and the Eagles, who put up 41 on the Patriots. 2018. Talk about a breakout season. Second-year quarterback Patrick Mahomes went from promising prospect to league-wide sensation in 2018. Considering he was the backup almost his entire rookie year, this was by far the craziest debut season by a quarterback we had ever seen. With over 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns, all those who watched this team were in awe. The Mahomes, Kelce, and Hill trio was born, and was virtually unguardable. They made defenses look silly week in and week out. This was also the year that we saw the iconic Rams-Chiefs regular season matchup. The Rams had the number 2 offense and edged out the Chiefs 54-51 in possibly the most entertaining regular season game most of us have ever seen.
Everett in stride! Wow! Touchdown Rams!
The 2018 Chiefs were only an average to above average rushing team, but that didn't seem to matter because of how dominant their pass game was. Their defense was pretty poor statistically, ranking out 24th in scoring and 31st in yards allowed. With a 12-4 finish, the Chiefs looked like a serious Super Bowl contender. In the playoffs, after a blowout win in the divisional round versus the Colts, their next game versus the Patriots in the AFC title match saw 4 scores in the final 3:32 to take the game to overtime. That's where the Patriots had a walk-off touchdown. The Patriots dominated in yards and first downs, and went on to win the Super Bowl. I also find it hilarious how the Patriots never win it all when they have the best offense, but then they win it whenever they face the best offense along the way. 2019. It's just a common trend at this point. A team breaks out of nowhere to take the league by storm for the 4th time in 5 years. In 2019, it was the Ravens led by Lamar Jackson. In a run-heavy offense designed around Lamar's sensational athleticism, the Ravens put up nearly 1,000 more yards on the ground than the second-best rushing team in the league. And crazy enough, they also led the league in passing touchdowns, and their defense was 3rd in scoring. Lamar won MVP, and Mark Andrews proved to be a dependable tight end. Also, Mark Ingram out of the backfield was the perfect power back to throw in. Nobody wanted a piece of these guys in the regular season. It was evident pretty early that these guys were going to be good. In week 1, They blew out the Dolphins 59-10. And this wasn't their only blowout victory. They did this routinely on their way to a 14-2 finish. But in the wild card, despite being favored by 10, the Titans pulled all the right cards to completely shut down Lamar and this offense. It was ugly from the get-go. 3 turnovers, combined with a healthy dose of Derrick Henry, sent the Ravens out of the postseason. 2020. In a bizarre year for all of us, teams had no preseason, but there were still some dominant offenses, namely the Bills and Packers, who both scored over 500 points. Now, the better of the two was Green Bay, considering they had similar production to the Bills with half the turnovers. The Aaron Rodgers to Devontae Adams connection had been special for years, but 2020 was a true masterclass.
Rodgers on the move. End zone for Adams. He's got it. Touchdown, Packers!
Adams had 1,374 yards and 18 receiving touchdowns. Aaron Jones had a stellar year as well out of the backfield, and tight end Robert Tonyan had double-digit touchdowns. All these players aided in the most efficient red zone offense in the NFL in 2020. With a slightly above average defense, the Packers, led by MVP Aaron Rodgers, finished the regular season 13-3 and on a 6-game winning streak. In the playoffs, after handling the Rams in the divisional, guess who? Tom Brady, with his new team, jumped out to a 28-10 lead early and held out for the win. This dude just seems to ruin everybody's party on a regular basis. 2021. The two teams at the top are the Dallas Cowboys and the Brady-led Tampa Bay Bucks. Dallas had a top 5 passing attack with a better run game than Tampa, with the likes of Zeke and breakout star Tony Pollard. But Tampa was better in critical situations, including third downs and scoring in the red zone. Also, Tampa scored on more percentage of drives and had slightly less turnovers per drive, so they get the edge over Dallas as the top offense in 2021. Coming off a Super Bowl victory, Tampa basically said screw the run game, and they seemingly threw it just about every play. Brady had over 5,300 yards and 43 touchdowns, throwing to stars Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Gronk. Also, Brady had his most impressive rushing season in 10 years. At the end of the regular season, Tampa finished 13-4 and looked like they had a good shot to repeat as Super Bowl champions. But in the playoffs, the Bucks came out flat versus the Rams, trailing 27-3 after a brutal 2.5 quarters. But amazingly, they clawed their way back to tie things up with 42 seconds left, only to give up the game-winning drive and field goal as time expired. 2022. After 4 seasons at or right near the top of the league offensively, the Chiefs produced the #1 offense in terms of points and yards per play, first downs, and they were #1 in percentage of scoring drives. No Tyreek? No problem. Mahomes went on to win his 2nd MVP. Kelce was as good as ever, and the Chiefs sort of reinvented themselves with the likes of guys like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Juju, and Jerick McKinnon. This year proved more than ever just how good Mahomes and Andy Reid are together. They weren't as explosive as they were with Tyreek, but they still consistently got the job done.
At the 10, at the 5, to the goal line, in for the touchdown!
And with an average defense, Kansas City finished 14-3, achieving another #1 seed. In the playoffs, they took down Jacksonville in the divisional round, battled with Cincinnati, and kicked the game-winning field goal with 3 seconds left to advance to the Super Bowl, and then versus the Eagles in the big game, the Chiefs won in a shootout with another last-second field goal. This did come after a sort of controversial penalty, but still, the Eagles had plenty of other opportunities in this game, and overall, it was an amazing performance by both teams. So in wrapping up this video, here's how the #1 offenses since 2010 compared to the #1 defenses in that same time span. Overall, they are nearly identical throughout the first 3 rounds of the playoffs, but the edge goes to the #1 defenses, as they've won 3 Super Bowls compared to the offenses just winning 1. And interestingly enough, all 3 Super Bowls that the defenses won came against #1 offenses, which just goes to show that defenses win championships.
Manning gets hit. Ball up for grabs.